Are you watching closely?
What really connects the movies of Christopher Nolan? What is the true philosophy, the underlying idea that binds it all together? By now, I think we all have a pretty good idea of what to expect from a Nolan movie. Over the years, he became widely popular for his ambitious and intricate stories that often feature some kind of manipulation of time. Either within the story itself, as characters experience the flow of time being slowed down, sped up, or altogether inverted. Or within the structure through which the story is told, as, more often than not, events unfold to us non-chronologically.
Do I lie to myself to be happy?
We've also come to know him for his morally conflicted main characters who are often engaged in some kind of deception, either to maintain a lie towards others or to themselves, which in turn is what makes a significant number of his stories end on a morally ambiguous note.
I must never know what he did.
This philosophically challenging aspect of his movies has already made Nolan the center of many discussions, and yet I still feel they are at times overshadowed by the overwhelming spectacle and all the twists and turns in his stories that, especially with his grand-scale science fiction stories, tend to keep discussions focused on concepts instead of meanings, on trying to make sense of the plot and describing some thematic elements, instead of really examining what it all means. I have already discussed a few Nolan movies individually, but after seeing Tenet and knowing what is to come, I wanted to see if I can articulate a more holistic lens through which to approach and understand the thematic richness of Nolan's movies. For despite his immense mainstream popularity and his evolution towards grand-scale blockbusters, I do believe Nolan has a distinct voice as a filmmaker. And more than that, he has something to say. When you look at his filmography as a whole, there definitely is a thesis, a worldview, and even an, in my opinion, underappreciated moral philosophy that is taking shape beneath the surface. And today, it is time to uncover it.
For me, when you watch the film, there's a sense in which we're addressing the idea that we're all sort of imprisoned in a way in our own views of the passage of time, of what's going on in the world, all the rest. And so there is this kind of leap of faith to the idea of an objective reality.
At the heart of Nolan's movies, there's an interesting struggle with the concept of objective reality, although the exact meaning of this, as we shall soon see, is not as straightforward as it might initially appear.
You gotta record the facts, analyze, get to the how and the why, then present your conclusions. Deal?
Deal.
When we meet Nolan's characters, like most people, they tend to see themselves as capable of attaining objective reality, of perceiving a factual truth, or at least enough of it to make reasonable, rational decisions and resolve whatever problems they are presented with.
I'm disciplined and organized. I use habit and routine to make my life possible.
In Memento, for example, Leonard tries to catch the man who killed his wife, but he suffers from a condition that prevents him from making new memories. And so, to counteract it, he has a meticulous system of photographs, notes, and other mementos to keep himself informed, to stay on top of the facts that his mind can no longer recollect.
I have it under control.
Similarly, in Inception, Cobb must dive deep into multiple layers of dreams, but he carries a totem, an artifact that helps him to distinguish the dream world from the real one, and to keep himself tethered to reality. Other characters simply rely on their wits, trust in their skills of observation and deduction, to for example solve a murder case, or to figure out the seemingly impossible trick of a rival magician.
It was the greatest magic trick I've ever seen.
As such, Nolan's movies initially present themselves as puzzles, as mysteries to be solved, which is often emphasized by his style of foreshadowing that invokes the feeling that there's more to it than meets the eye. Something that we don't yet understand, but that promises an eventual revelation. Whether it is a ghost in the bedroom, a strange appearance of objects, or some other kind of anomaly in an otherwise relatively ordinary reality. Either way, there's always something to be figured out, and a method that is provided to do so.
Now, you're looking for the secret, but you won't find it. Because, of course, you're not really looking. You don't really want to know.
But anyone who has seen a Nolan movie knows this is never really the full story, or at least it's not the main focus point. Like the magician in The Prestige, Nolan knows that
the secret impresses no one. The trick you use it for is everything.
yes, he often builds interesting and unexpected twists to resolve the puzzles he presented us with. But the real revelation is not the putting together of the puzzle. It is about what they reveal about the characters, what they reveal about us. In this sense, the more relevant questions that Nolan seems to be interested in are not so much of an ontological nature. They are not really questions about the nature of reality. Instead, they are much more so of an epistemological nature. They are questions about the true nature of knowledge, about what we can know and about what we don't and cannot ever know.
If we see beyond the horizon, we can't cope.
There's some things that aren't meant to be known.
If there's one thing that Nolan unambiguously emphasizes throughout his stories, it is, as he said, that we are imprisoned in our own views.
You can't trust a man's life to your little notes and pictures.
Why not?
Because your notes could be unreliable.
More philosophically, he's saying that we see the world subjectively, which means that the reality we experience is not a direct external one, but one that is filtered through our perception, through our consciousness. This is not to say that everything is an illusion and that there is no such thing as an objective external world. Again, we're not really interested in ontology here. No, what it means is that the reality we experience is always the one that is constructed in our minds, thereby making it inherently limited, flawed, and vulnerable to manipulation.
It's 10 o'clock, Detective Dormer.
You bet.
At night.
Oh.
As we often see in his stories, situations can be misjudged, facts can be tampered with, people can lie and be lied to.
You knew. This was all a sham.
We cannot even fully trust ourselves, as our lack of access to objectivity in the outside world extends to our internal one as well.
Look, memory can change the shape of a room, it can change the color of a car. And memories can be distorted. They're just an interpretation, they're not a record.
Memento presents an interesting metaphor in this sense, as Leonard relies on notes, photographs, and other external elements that serve as his memory. But what he really does is visualize externally the reality of what goes on inside all of us internally. It demonstrates how our memory, our consciousness, is not really a stable foundation that we can rely on, but instead looks more like Leonard's inconsistent and scrambled collection of notes and images, recording but a fraction of what is experienced, and then exposing what is recorded from that already untrustworthy external world to even further manipulation on an unconscious internal level.
My subconscious seems polite enough.
You wait, they'll turn ugly.
And this leads into what fascinates me most about Nolan, which is that he seems to understand that subjectivism is about more than the idea that our appeal to factual knowledge, to an objective reality, is questionable. He not only demonstrates these epistemological issues, his big revelation is not merely that we are bound by our own subjectivity, but he uses this almost as a premise to explore what implications this has for who we really are, for how it reveals what really defines us as human beings.
What is the most resilient parasite? An idea. Resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate. An idea that is fully formed, fully understood, that sticks. Right in there somewhere.
In her academic essay on subjectivity in Memento and Inception, Karen D. Hoffman connects Nolan's movies to the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, who also argued for the importance of reflecting deeper on the implications of our subjectivity. To Kierkegaard, as Hoffman explains, we are not just disengaged minds that think about the world from a distance. We exist within it. And this, he believed, is what makes subjectivism not just a question of knowledge, but perhaps much more so a matter of identity. He argued that, as subjective beings, we do not really define ourselves by what we know, but rather by how we judge, value, appropriate, and integrate it into our lives. Like many characters in Nolan's films, Hoffman writes, Kierkegaard is interested in ideas, values, and commitments that stick by having emotional significance for an individual.
You don't want the truth. You make up your own truth.
In other words, both Kierkegaard and Nolan draw attention to the way we basically create our own reality. Which, to be clear, is not about exchanging objective facts for subjective beliefs. You know, 2 + 2 does not equal 5 just because you want it to. No, it's about recognizing that when it comes to the things that matter most to us on a more existential level, our passions, our ethical beliefs, our sense of self, all the things that really drive us, that shape our identity and guide our actions, objective reality simply doesn't mean as much to us as we might tell ourselves.
I already know how he does it, Robert. Same way he always does, the same way as we do. It's just that you want something more.
And from this, we also get a much better sense of the real conflict that most of Nolan's characters experience.
Well, I go on facts, not recommendations, but thank you.
As mentioned in the beginning, they often see themselves as being capable of attaining objective reality. They are driven by method, they have their systems. But following Kierkegaard, this is also exactly what leads them into trouble, as their obsession with factual truth often results in an inability or an unwillingness to acknowledge the real implications of their subjectivity. As Hoffman explains, Kierkegaard worries that the scientific view of the individual emphasizes detached reason and fails to value passionate engagement with self, others, and the world.
You keep telling yourself what you know. But what do you believe? What do you feel?
Most of Nolan's characters start off not really in search of the truth. They merely seek a pretense of truth. They want to lay claim to some kind of objective reality, not because they truly believe that it will make a meaningful difference to them, but because it lets them avoid having to confront their own self, their own values, their beliefs, desires, fears, and traumas. Avoid having to reflect on how all this affects who they really are and how they relate themselves to those around them.
So certain of your world, of what's real.
I could feel it right there. This is gonna catch up with me.
They seek some kind of salvation in objective reality and then get frustrated when that reality eludes them.
Why can't you outthink him? How can he not know?
How can he not know? He must know what he did.
They become obsessed, delusional. They start twisting facts, spinning lies, finding excuses. And as they descend further into their false realities, they not only risk a complete detachment from the world around them, but also the complete disconnection from themselves.
I was so convinced that you'd remember.
And he thought I meant to do it. So maybe I did.
But it didn't stick. Like nothing ever sticks, like this won't stick.
I just don't know anymore.
And so there is this kind of leap of faith to the idea of an objective reality. So there's the idea of belief or faith involved with what these characters are choosing to invest in terms of what's really going on in the story.
I have to believe in a world outside my own mind. I have to believe that when my eyes are closed, the world's still there.
In the end, however, as Nolan seems to argue, we do have to have some notion of reality in order to be able to function. We cannot live as if there is no truth at all. Kierkegaard also said that, ultimately, we have to live as if some things are true. But as Hoffman emphasizes, he doesn't believe that we should therefore try to convince ourselves that they are objectively true. Instead, we should embrace subjective truths for what they are, accepting that we've chosen them despite our uncertainty.
Admit it. You don't believe in one reality anymore. So choose.
But what do you believe? What's happened.
Interestingly, Nolan often highlights the subtle ways in which we already do this. Just by assuming the world is still there when we close our eyes, we place a certain kind of trust in the nature of our reality. We already make an almost instinctive leap of faith that, philosophically speaking, is not really based on factual assurance, but on belief.
I know what that's gonna feel like when I pick it up. See? Certainties. It's the kind of memory you take for granted.
That's reversing the flow of time. Doesn't us being here now mean it never happens?
Optimistically, I'd say that's right.
Maybe we should trust that, even if we can't understand it yet.
So, do you want to take a leap of faith? Or become an old man, filled with regret, waiting to die alone?
For Nolan's characters, it seems, this is the difference between triumph and tragedy. By insisting on objective truth, by the idea that they are driven by the quote-unquote facts, they remain ever in a state of existential despair, always in doubt, always focused on the external, always looking for redemption on the outside, frustrated by a reality that they cannot grasp, that does not let itself be arranged as they see fit. It's a path that leads only to self-delusion, pain, and loneliness.
You don't believe in God, or in future, or anything outside of your own experience.
The rest is belief, and I don't have it.
It's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you.
Don't lose your way.
But if they come to embrace their ontological uncertainty, come to accept that they are subjective beings who are defined by their beliefs instead of by facts, who are driven by what has personal and emotional significance to them instead of by what they can discern to be objectively true, then they can start looking inward, they can examine themselves with honesty, take responsibility for their choices, and decide who they want to become, what they want to commit themselves to, what they want to believe in, put their trust in, and take the leap of faith. The victorious characters in Nolan's movies demonstrate how we can replace what is objectively uncertain for that which is subjectively true. How we can find ideas that stick, that help us to keep going, to stay engaged, stay in touch. They demonstrate how we can find hope, how we can overcome our existential despair through belief.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light.
For Nolan, this is the fundamental battle we face, individually, collectively, over and over.
Each generation looks out for its own survival.
All we did is survive. That's enough.
Despite lacking objective certainty, despite not being able to receive answers for our deepest existential questions, as Nolan ultimately shows us, it is vital that we choose to believe that our actions have meaning, that there are causes worth fighting for, that our love, our feelings, our subjective reality, that it all matters, that it is worth it to take the leap. Because that is how we remain connected to others and to ourselves, how we stay passionately engaged with the world around us. That is how we find our way home.
What's happened's happened. It's just an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world. It's not an excuse to do nothing.
What do you think? Home.
Maybe it means something more, something we can't yet understand.
Take a leap of faith.
Call it what you want.
What do you call it?
Reality. Now let me go.
I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
As I was making this video, not much is known yet about Nolan's upcoming project Oppenheimer. But if I had to guess, I expect it to be another expression of the general thesis that's been laid out here. A story about the obsessive search for truth, one that, in this case, tears into the literal fabric of reality, and that results in an invention that is terrifying and destructive, and also revelatory to its creator as he comes to understand that the implications of his work will not be defined by objective qualities, but instead by subjective ones, by fear, power, and ambition. All the things that, when left unexamined, could very well lead to the destruction of us all. I, for one, am definitely looking forward to this movie, but until then, if you want more Nolan-esque stories, you know, mysteries and thrillers that touch on the darker side of humanity, I highly recommend Acorn TV. Acorn TV is a streaming service with captivating crime drama, mystery and thriller series from Britain and beyond. You can watch everything completely commercial free on all of your devices, with new content arriving every Monday. And all this for just $5.99 a month. If you want to try it out, you can go to acorn.tv and use the promo code likestoriesofold to get 30 days for free. So just follow the link in the description to start your free month of great television today.